I know, yet again another video on how to learn Japanese. Look, I'm gonna be honest with you. If you clicked on this video hoping to hear some magical method on how to learn Japanese in 3 months, well, I'm sorry to tell you, but this is not that video. This video is for anyone who actually wants to achieve fluency. And yes, it will absolutely take more than 3 months. So who am I? Well, I'm glad you asked. My name is Justin. Hi, I live in Canada, and I first started learning Japanese back in 2006. And if my math is correct, that's about 19 years ago. Yeah, I know, a long time, right? All right, look, my journey with the language was not some straight line to fluency. In fact, it was actually quite the opposite. It was probably the messiest way to learn a language imaginable. You see, in the beginning, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. And mostly I was self-taught, I had very little guidance, and online resources were extremely limited at the time. And this led to a lot of trial and error, a lot of wasted time, and many gaps in my studying. Like, sometimes I'd go entire years without even touching the language, and it set me back significantly. But I never really gave up. I always kept coming back to the language, only to repeat the same mistakes, the same cycle, over and over and over again. And don't get me wrong, like, I could study. I mean, I was able to pass the highest levels of the JLPT, kanji I was surprisingly good at, but despite all of this effort, I just really couldn't communicate. Like, my theoretical understanding was strong, but whenever it came to actually using the language, my mind would kind of just go blank. You know, I was doing everything right according to conventional wisdom, so why was I struggling so much to hold up a simple conversation? I remember thinking, am I just not cut out for this? Is there something wrong with the way that I learn? And if you're thinking, wow, it took this guy nearly 2 decades to learn Japanese, what an idiot. Well, you're not alone in thinking that, because I also felt that way about myself for a very, very long time. But through it all, after many years of struggle, I've finally come to a pretty clear understanding about Japanese, or any language for that matter, and it actually stems from an approach that I tried years ago. You see, there used to be this website called AJATT, all Japanese, all the time, and just like it sounds, it's pretty simple. You surround yourself with Japanese all the time, and eventually you get good at it. So I thought I'd try it out. I started listening to Japanese, watching Japanese movies, TV shows, podcasts, but every time I'd only catch a few words here and there. And after a few weeks, it felt like it wasn't working, so I just gave up. I tried this approach several more times over the years thinking, okay, now I'm ready. But each time, it was the same story. I always felt like I needed to memorize more words, more grammar, before I was ready to actually understand real Japanese. And that was exactly my problem. How can I expect myself to understand real Japanese if I don't allow myself to get enough exposure to real Japanese? Well, the answer is simple. I simply just needed more input, more exposure to real Japanese. But unfortunately, I just didn't have the proper guidance at the time. I mean, it's so easy to say, hey, just do something in Japanese all day, every day for 5 years and you'll be fluent. But there's more to it than that. You see, you need some sort of framework, but at the same time, you definitely don't want to overcomplicate things. This actually led to what I now call my own framework for effective language immersion. And despite my own journey and all the talk about how incredibly difficult Japanese is, I'm here to tell you that it's actually pretty simple. Not easy, just simple. You see, languages are generally perceived as hard, but often not because of the language itself, but because of how vast they are. There's just so much to know. But if you know how to learn a language effectively, you'll realize that the difficulty largely comes down to the process. So, in other words, if your process sucks, the language will feel hard. So, no. What makes Japanese hard for most people is actually not the unique grammar or the intimidating kanji. It's simply the approach that people use to learn it. And again, I'm not saying any of this is going to be easy, because learning Japanese to fluency takes a long time. And that's precisely the hard part. But a simple process can make that journey faster, more efficient, and far more enjoyable. And that's what I'm going to show you. How I would learn Japanese to fluency if I was starting over today with what I know now. And I guess you could call it immersion, but I have a different name for it, the CCR method. CCR stands for consistency, context, and repetition. Now, this is by no means an official method. I kind of just made it up because it's easy to remember that way, but these are the 3 most important ingredients for success if your goal is to be fluent in Japanese. So let's break it down. Consistency is really just about showing up. You got to keep at it every single day. It's not about pulling an all-nighter trying to cram as much Japanese into your brain in a single session. It's about making it something you just do on a daily basis. More on this later. The second C is context. So context is where you're actually going to experience the language, allowing it to just wash over you and not just analyze it. We're talking about listening to native speakers, watching Japanese dramas, Japanese movies, reading actual Japanese books, and even playing video games in Japanese. You want to acquire the language naturally through real, authentic Japanese. So no, this isn't about memorizing lists of words, it's about seeing how those words are used in real life. And last but not least, we have repetition. And this is very similar to consistency, but it focuses on re-encountering specific vocabulary, grammar, and sentence structures multiple times within different contexts to really solidify that understanding and recall. Think of it like this. Consistency is showing up to the gym every single day, and repetition is about doing your sets and reps for each exercise. And it's the same in language learning. Just hearing a new word once usually isn't enough. You need to expose yourself to it repeatedly in different sentences, different contexts, and through different mediums for it to stick. Now, these concepts might sound familiar, and you're absolutely right. Like, the underlying principles of language acquisition aren't new. But what I found missing from my journey, and for many others I talked to, was a simple, memorable set of guiding principles. And you can integrate this into your lifestyle wherever you are in the world. So no, you absolutely do not need to book a flight to Tokyo for this to work. What you do need to do, though, is create your own Japan wherever you are in the world. And honestly, doing this in 2025 is so much easier than when I started 2 decades ago. Back then, we didn't even have smartphones, but today you literally have the internet, unlimited access to Japanese content in your pocket at all times. It's never been easier. Okay, so we talked about the basic concept for immersion, but now let's talk about why it's effective for fluency. So after years of struggling and hundreds of hours memorizing grammar points and vocabulary from a textbook, I finally realized that I was learning Japanese instead of acquiring it. And honestly, I didn't even know there was a difference between the two, but apparently there is. Language learning is a conscious process, and most people approach it like some sort of complex math problem. Like, you're just memorizing rules, drilling exercises. You gain knowledge about the language's structure. And yes, this helps build a strong foundation, sure, but it doesn't always lead to natural, spontaneous use. Language acquisition, on the other hand, is a natural, subconscious process. Like, think about how babies learn their first language. They're not studying rules or memorizing lists, right? Instead, they pick up the language by simply being exposed to it. They listen, imitate, and get a feel for what sounds right. It's simply just pattern matching through hundreds and hundreds of hours of observing. And this is one of the core insights from linguists like Stephen Krashen. And yeah, you probably heard of him before, but he says humans have this ability to acquire language primarily through comprehensible input, meaning that they understand the messages being conveyed in the target language, even if they don't understand every single word. So think of it like this. Imagine you're watching some sort of Japanese cooking show, for example. You might not know the exact word for whisk, but if the chef clearly demonstrates the action while saying the word, and you see them using a whisk, your brain connects the new sound to the action and the object. So basically, your brain understands the message, and in doing so, you start to acquire the word without even looking it up or writing it down. So how long is all this immersion going to take? Yeah, I know there's a lot of claims online like, speak Japanese fluently in 3 months. Yeah, that's just noise, and I'm here to tell you that that's just not how this works. Even if you've already put in years of study, reaching that high level of fluency where you can comfortably understand and express yourself in Japanese will still take several more years of consistent effort. Now, I'm not saying you can't achieve some level of fluency in a shorter time frame, but you need to be realistic about your goals. Otherwise, you're just gonna burn yourself out and potentially give up. Setting realistic expectations and knowing your why will set you up for success. And your why could be anything from the pure enjoyment of the process, the desire to live and work in Japan someday, or maybe you just want to watch your favorite anime without subtitles. I don't know, but seriously, nothing wrong with that. But the fact that you're watching this video right now and you already made it this far, that's a pretty good sign. So just keep remembering your why and you'll be fine. All right, so if I was to start learning Japanese from scratch today with all my current knowledge, this is exactly how I'd begin. I'd quickly build a solid foundational understanding of the language, focusing on just enough grammar and common vocabulary, including some kanji, to make real Japanese somewhat comprehensible. Now, for many of you, you've likely already put in a significant amount of effort to build a foundation. You know a lot of grammar, you know a lot of vocabulary, and that's fantastic. My mistake was thinking that I needed to keep studying more rules before I could truly start to understand and use real Japanese. Remember, the goal isn't to just know about Japanese, it's to acquire it and to be able to speak it naturally. Reviewing specific grammar points or looking up new vocabulary definitely has its place, but the main effort now needs to shift dramatically. So once you have that solid foundation, you should move to at least an 80-10 mix, where the vast majority, at least 80% of your time, is spent listening and reading, and only 20% or less is dedicated to that more traditional study. And please, please, please don't fall in the same trap that I did, where I prioritized traditional study over everything else. You simply cannot just study your way to fluency. Trust me, I tried. Now it's time for the fun part. Consistent daily engagement with real Japanese. This high volume exposure is how your brain is going to naturally recognize patterns, pick up nuances, and essentially acquire the language. So how many hours a day are we talking here? Well, more input is always beneficial, and some dedicated learners do about 8+ hours daily, but you absolutely do not need to go that extreme to make progress. For most of us with busy lives like myself, 8 hours a day is just not going to be realistic. Consistency, above all, is key. Even just 1 hour of focused input every single day is far more effective than a 7-hour blitz once a week. Daily exposure helps your brain continuously engage with the language and build connections. Now, I'm not suggesting you do just 1 hour a day. You should absolutely be doing as much as you can. But the point is, you need to be getting at least some exposure every single day. This will help keep the language fresh in your mind and build your Japanese brain. And even with a super demanding schedule, you can still achieve substantial input by cleverly integrating it into your daily life. And this isn't about finding more time, it's really just about making more of the time that you already have. We'll dive more into that in a bit. Okay, super important. You must be comfortable not understanding every single word that you hear. Look, when you first start this whole immersion thing, you're going to grasp very little. And that's perfectly normal. And you're going to likely spend hundreds and hundreds of hours absorbing content that you just understand very little of. This fuzziness, for lack of a better word, is the first step. Even if you only pick up a word or phrase here or there, your brain isn't ignoring the rest. Instead, it's actively absorbing the rhythm, the intonation, common filler words, and natural speaking speed. All of it. It's kind of like your brain is building its own internal database of how real Japanese actually sounds. It connects what you do understand with the sounds that you don't quite grasp yet, and gradually, over time, little by little, it starts to make sense. For maximum effectiveness, aim for that sweet spot. This concept mirrors Stephen Krashen's I+1. Here, I represents your current understanding, and +1 signifies content that is just slightly above it. This is the ideal challenge level. Consider it like a video game. If it's too hard, it's like going straight to the final boss from the beginning. It's difficult, it's frustrating, and it just makes you want to quit. In language learning, this is trying to listen to fast, complex Japanese where you understand almost nothing. It just sounds like noise, it's overwhelming, and your brain just quickly gives up. If it's too easy, it offers no challenge, quickly becomes boring, and it kind of feels pointless. It's kind of like endlessly playing the first level of Mario over and over again. Only listening to Japanese that you already understand 100% won't push your brain to grow, and you will not progress. The sweet spot is kind of like when you're playing an RPG and you find that new area where the enemies are just a few levels above you. They're tough enough that you have to think, use your abilities, and maybe even try a new strategy, but you can still win and gain experience. It's challenging, it's enjoyable, and it motivates you to keep progressing. In Japanese, this means finding content where you understand most of it, but there's still a few new words or phrases being introduced, and that's your I+1 in action. In the beginning, however, even with a strong foundation of the language, content will often feel like that super hard video game level. Ideally, you should actively seek for ways to make content just a little bit more comprehensible. And this is where context comes in. Use visuals from cartoons or vlogs, and make sure that you use content on a familiar topic. These act as hooks that will provide the brain with something to grasp, helping it connect the puzzle pieces and build a stronger understanding. And that's where you're going to start to extract value. And the amazing part is, once your brain begins to automatically make sense of what you're hearing, even if it's just incremental, it feels incredibly rewarding. And you're going to naturally want more of that feeling, which is going to fuel an even greater desire to listen to more content, creating a powerful, self-reinforcing learning cycle. All right, so as you know, language has two main components. We have input and output. Input is how you take in the language, that's your listening and reading, and output is how you produce it, that's your writing and speaking. For effective immersion, our primary focus is on that input side, listening and reading. So first, let's discuss listening, and this is where your brain is going to do a ton of work, naturally picking up patterns and really internalizing the language. The best part about listening is its flexibility. You don't always need your full undivided attention to benefit from it. You can listen to Japanese while doing something else, and this could be cooking, cleaning, commuting to and from work, whatever you want. And this is incredibly beneficial for people with busy schedules, allowing you to really maximize the time that you already have and stack those valuable input hours. First, we have active listening. This is where you give your full attention and you're deeply engaged. And this is crucial for making the biggest leaps in comprehension. Passive listening is where your attention is split. You're just catching bits and pieces, like when you're listening to a podcast while doing chores, for example. It's fantastic for significantly increasing your overall input volume without requiring intense focus. And lastly, we have background listening, and this is the just noise mode. So your attention is pretty much elsewhere. You could be sleeping or working intensely. And you're not going to learn much new explicitly here, but it does help your ear acclimatize to the different sounds and natural rhythm of Japanese. You're naturally going to spend most of your time with passive listening, but you should also actively seek opportunities for deep, focused listening as well. And most importantly, mix it up. As I mentioned before, podcasts are great, but I do encourage you to explore a variety of sources like movies, TV shows, music, the news, even anime. Yes, even anime. Just absolutely do not use English subtitles. Your brain's going to default to the English and you probably won't acquire anything new. Just remember to always choose content that actually interests you. This is going to provide your brain with those hooks that I talked about earlier, and it keeps it fun. If you're bored, your brain's going to tune it out, making your efforts far less effective. So reading is another incredible way to expand your Japanese skills, especially vocab and getting comfortable with kanji. I highly recommend starting to read concurrently with your listening input, as these two forms of input work powerfully hand in hand. And the goal here, if you're a beginner, is just to get comfortable with the language itself and then start connecting the sounds that you hear with the words that you see on the page. The most effective strategy here is to prioritize massive listening input while also integrating low pressure reading. I suggest starting with content like manga with furigana or even children's books if you're at that really low level still. As you get more comfortable, you can gradually move towards more complex Japanese books and novels intended for adults. Whenever I go to Japan, I love going to Japanese bookstores and just buying a bunch of random books on topics that I'm interested in. If you read about topics you love, you're naturally going to pick up the relevant vocabulary that you're actually going to want to use. And the same applies to listening as well. Another way that I integrate reading into my daily routine is by playing video games. And my number one rule is that I only play video games in Japanese, especially those with tons of dialogue. Seriously, some video games have a lot of reading and it helps immensely. And with this, I guess I accidentally turned a hobby that's often seen as unproductive into a powerful language learning tool, which is pretty cool, I guess. But seriously, if you get creative, you'll find there are many ways to integrate Japanese into your daily life. It could be as simple as just changing your phone's interface to Japanese. Every little bit helps. Okay, so the last thing we're going to cover is output, and this is the most important thing for achieving fluency. Something that a lot of people miss, and it's a really common misconception, is the idea that the best way to get good at speaking is to simply just speak more. Yes, speaking more helps, but how are you supposed to speak naturally if you haven't had enough input? Think of it this way: you can't output what you haven't acquired. If you force yourself to talk before your brain's built up that essential internal library of how real Japanese works and sounds, you're probably going to end up making a lot of the same grammar mistakes or using awkward, unnatural phrases. And this is because your brain just simply hasn't seen enough correct sentence patterns yet. For example, children go through a silent period where they spend a long time just listening and absorbing the language before they even try to start producing words. And while adults aren't exactly like children, the principle still holds. Listening comes first, speaking comes second. So I guess the big question is, when is the best time to start speaking? Well, you can start speaking whenever you want, but just don't force it until you've filled your brain with hundreds and hundreds of hours of input. The first one is shadowing, and this is a simple yet incredibly effective technique and probably one of my favorites. Basically, you just mimic a native speaker as they talk, like any YouTube video is fine. It's just a fantastic way to get used to the natural rhythm, intonation, and pronunciation of the Japanese language without the pressure of creating your own sentences yet. I actually recommend shadowing long before you're even ready to start speaking, since you're just imitating and not actually producing the language on your own. It's basically borderline input, and it's also a great way to practice real pronunciation as well. Chat with an AI language partner. This might be a little bit controversial, but it's actually a great option if you're just starting to speak. It's a fantastic way to build confidence because you're practicing without the fear of being judged by a real person. You can make mistakes, you can try again, you can refine your sentences all at your own pace. Just remember, this is a tool and not an actual replacement for a genuine human being. Connect with real people, locally or online. You can find actual Japanese speakers to practice with on apps like HelloTalk and italki. They're great for finding online conversation partners or tutors. And depending on where you live, you might even be able to attend a Japanese language meetup group as well. You can try a quick online search to see if there's any in your area. Online voice chats. So apps like HelloTalk have voice rooms where you can join random chats and simply just start speaking Japanese. And don't worry if you suck. Like, nobody on the app is going to expect you to be a master of the language. Otherwise, you just wouldn't be there. Journaling in Japanese. This is not speaking, but it is a powerful form of low pressure output. You can take your time putting thoughts into Japanese, which will help solidify your understanding of how words and grammar fit together. And if you use apps like HelloTalk, you can just write daily posts on there about whatever you want in Japanese, and people will correct your sentences for you. It's great. All right, so when you feel the time is right, you can try any of these methods. It's really up to you. Just keep at it, and once you've built up enough confidence, try to get as much speaking practice as possible with real Japanese people. All right, so there you have it, the method that changed everything for me. And look, I'm hardly the first to advocate for immersion, but honestly, it just works. But if there's anything you take away from this video, please keep these three things at top of mind: consistency, context, repetition. Just remember, Japanese immersion can be simple. It just takes a long time. We're talking years here, not days. Don't think you're going to be fluent by next Tuesday. You just need to be patient, trust the process, and keep showing up. And above all, keep it simple, keep it fun. Alright, if you found the video helpful, make sure to hit that like button. And if you want to see more content like this, make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.